I think it depends on the subject.
Yeah.
I use a lot of evaluation in math because it'll ask me to agree, disagree with what people are doing. And
Okay.
kind of looking over it and evaluating, do I agree with what they did? Do I disagree? Why do I agree? Why do I disagree?
Okay. Very good.
I think I spend a lot of time like in math and not as much in the other subjects of asking how did you know that or why did you know that, just because my brain is trained in math to think like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to get better about using the how and the whys in the other subjects, not just in math, because it's easy to think about, okay, well, how did you know that in math? It's harder to like extend that knowledge, like when they're reading, you know, like for them to actually have to use evidence.
Okay. And see, for me, that's just the opposite, because my mind works in reading.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can dig deep on that all day long, but then math, it's like,
Well, just because.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I know you can, but. What about you, Miss Briles? What are you calling it out?
I don't know, because I feel harder on myself than what is probably true.
No, that's true.
So, I don't know, like when I first look at it, I feel like sometimes you call on those kids for their recall, then you just want the right answer, you know?
Uh-huh.
And then, but in reality, I know I go deeper than that. Does that make sense? I'm not gonna make myself look bad,
Absolutely.
but it's just like trying to go deeper and how to justify and prove it is something that I feel like you should always be working on, so I don't feel like I've attained that. Does that make sense?
I think it would be interesting
Yes.
to go back and look at your lesson plans for like a week and just highlight every verb. And then just kind of see where all of your verbs for one whole week went. That might be kind of interesting just to reflect back on lesson plans that you've already done.
But yeah, I don't know. I tend to be harder on myself though, so.
Now, as far as like kindergarten goes, can you get to the extended thinking? Or is that more of a through the year progression? Because I know you guys are your own little world. Mhm. But that's good though. They need the skills and concept.
A lot of it's level 1.
Do you think you could?
Yeah, but I mean, you know, as it goes along, it gets hard in the year.
Well, I think it's interesting that Terry said the thing about the lesson planning, because when I'm actually lesson planning and typing these out, I really think about those. I mean, it sounds bad, but like, I think about the words that I should be using, and that kind of builds what I do. Does that make sense? Like, I
Yes,
think about
that's great.
what should they
So
be
you should
doing, what are those words that apply to those, you know, evaluate. So then when I'm making a lesson, I'm like, okay, well, they need to be evaluating, so what should I do? Because I'm like, I want them to do that higher thinking. A lot of times I use these words to actually like make my I can statements and things like that. So that it kind of, the follow through is not just, I'm gonna do this activity and I'm gonna make the I can statement. It very much starts there, and then I use that to guide what I do with them.
Excellent, that's the purpose of it. Okay, so you've got the recall and reproduction stage, skill and concept, strategic thinking, and then extended thinking. So this is just taking it level by level, and every one of these levels is extremely important. Because there are times you just have to recall information. It's just part of learning. But then you can take that and get deeper. Okay, so how to effectively incorporate questioning into your lessons. And yes,
Okay, I just,
thank you.
I've always had this question about like when words go, like, when they stretch multiple DOKs, how do you decide which, I mean, obviously, you could probably look at it and say, well, it's recall or reproduction or skill or concept, but how do you, like, explain is on the 3 different ones. So how do you decide, like, especially with explaining, how do you decide which one it is? Does that make sense? So like the key word of explain
Well, I think
is
it's
on.
what you're doing with that explanation. If you're just saying, it's taking that one step further each time, in my opinion. You know, because you could explain, well, 4 times 3 is 12 because you've got 4 groups of 3. Well, you're
Okay.
explaining it, then now crossing it over, using it different ways.
Okay.
Crossing it over into other subject areas. Okay, so, talk at your table how you use questioning in your classroom. How do you use it? How do you plan for it?
I do a lot of how did you know, where did you get that from? Like, especially during
when we're doing like, they do the whole, what are you talking about? It's the 8. It's not just 8.
Well, it's just,
I know
to
it's not
me,
silly, but it's like, I get them to
tell
say,
them,
okay,
they don't care.
They're
They're just
not
used
used
to. So
you know,
there's something
going that extra, but it's
into a question.
just asking those
discovery,
questions and digging deeper, not just assuming
then
that
they're
they know
happy
what
to
they is the
go.
big thing. Like, because a lot of them
So-
already do, but it's getting them
Because I've tried
to
the
tell you
lessons
that they
where,
know.
you know,
and that they
and normally it
understand
is
what
always
you're
questioning,
trying to
but
do,
you
not
know
just
those like quick little, we
letting
gotta
them
just kind of get through this
buy
whatever,
it,
and
oh,
I'm
they
like, well,
know.
that was pointless. We should have just made it structure for 2 days.
Well, like you mentioned earlier, just the discussion about that you're doing.
But I do a lot of questioning and have them discuss with their partner, and I do really do a good job with their partner says that.
Yeah, that disagree, just disagree part, and you have to justify your answer, why you agree or why you disagree. So often with math, there's a calculation error, and then while they're either agreeing or disagreeing, it's all right, double check, make sure you're, and as they're double checking, they're, oh, that's what I forgot to do, oh, that's where I made a mistake.
Well, what I found is, for me, my math and focus, I feel, is more level 2. And then my calendar math, I take it up to 3.
Yeah.
And so I use whatever we're doing in math and focus, which kind of pretty basic. And then we start, incorporating, how we use it in our life and things like that. Or, like addition, like for example, today in calendar math, it's like, well, today is this day. Amy in our class has a birthday on this date, so how many more days? And so learning to count up, but making it so it's something that they can relate to. And of course, it's easy to do a lot of stuff whenever you have this. But, and I kind of feel the same way with workshops.
No, it's good. I have one of
Workshops.
those. Oh my gosh.
Get in there and get
I got 15 hours and started, I don't switch it off.
and then that seat say it. I'm trying to extend
So,
it.
I guess that's for you, just make time to
It's fairly easy with a reader's workshop, when you're in your head. It's like right out here, it says I live like all the
Oh, yeah.
Okay, does somebody want to share how they use it in their classroom? Maybe one for grade level, so then we can kind of build on each other. Yes?
I said just kind of not letting them get by, like, even if I think they know what they're talking about, I'll ask them why anyways, because if they really do know, they can learn from each other. So like, if they really do know, they're gonna have a good way to explain it, and then others around them are kinda like, oh, so even if you would assume they would know it, especially if you're doing something whole group, make them explain it anyways. And they kinda look at me like, why are you making me do this? But, I want them to be able to describe their thinking in other terms for their classmates and for me.
Okay. Fourth grade?
We said it's pretty fluid because you just go from deeper questions to other level questions, and it depends on your lesson, but that's basically how we teach most of the time.
Okay. Third grade?
I talked about, well, I do a lot of like pose a question and have them turn and talk and then share out what their partner said. Because if I tell them something, they don't hear anything. But if you pose a question and then they are forced to, every single person turn and talk to somebody, it's not just your 4 people answering, then, and they know that they'll be randomly called on, then I feel like they're forced to think about it. And so like the power of discovery is, well, it's way more powerful than the telephone. So that's what we.
Excellent. Second's not here. First.
Well, we talked about calendar math. There's a lot deeper level questions in the calendar math, and then also in our workshop.
Okay.
Those questions with our video.
kindergarten?
I think part of the power in your questioning is understanding your curriculum and knowing where your intention is to take your students. Because if you don't know far enough ahead where you're going yourself and where you're supposed to be taking your students, you can't get to deeper level of questioning. You have to know where you're headed in order to structure your questions to lead your students down that path.
Very good. You do, that's perfect, Randy. You've gotta know where you're headed. And you've got to take the kids in the direction you wanna go. I mean, I've always been one that's teach those teachable moments, you know, and in that moment, bring up those questions and let it the kids guide it, but you've got to also know where it is you're headed. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so setting up questions. Heather hit on this, letting the kids, give them that question, letting them figure it out. Questions designed to help students attain a deeper understanding of content will eventually increase their interest in a topic, which leads to deeper learning. So letting them discover, instead of standing up there going this, letting them figure it out. Wait time, this has always been huge. Even back in my day in college, they always said, you know, it was count to 3 in your head, then call on somebody else. Then it was count to 5 in your head, then go to somebody else. But now, it's like that waiting time and letting them think. It feels a little uncomfortable sometimes, you're putting them on that spot, but it gives them that opportunity to think and participate and get a little bit deeper instead of just spouting off that answer or just sitting there. Giving them time to think is critical with your questions. Okay, to give them cues, to activate their prior knowledge and to preview what the students are about to experience. Give them that idea. What are we about to do here? Okay, use questions before a learning experience to establish a mental set in which students process the learning experience. That's back in the day of that anticipatory set. You are giving them, bringing in, this is what we're about to do. You give them little clues. You don't tell them, here's, exactly, but you let them figure it out. Let them build that information. Okay, and advanced organizers. This is where that whole packet that Amy just gave us. Using those to build the students' background knowledge. See where it is that they're coming from. You've got the KWL charts. Perfect for questioning. See what they know ahead of time. They bridge that gap of what they already know and what they need to know. Because if you've got a lesson that you may have this beautiful planned out lesson, but if the kids already know everything about that topic, well, there's no point to go over it again. See what they know, let them tell you what they know about it.
So today, kindergarten, you guys are so good. We introduced spelling words with a CK at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, I'm going to teach them the difference between the short vowel and long vowel, and how we used to do with the CK. They already know. They're like, we know how to do this, Miss Humphrey. I'm like, you do. They happened 4 times. Said, oh, we already know it. I'm like, you do. Well, I told them, I said, what am I going to teach you all today? That's funny. But they knew, and they understood when to put a CK at the end of a word.
So now I'm going to put you on the spot. So now what are you going to do? Now they already know that skill.
Oh, no, we already
So what do you do?
adjustments just like that.
Yeah.
Well, then, we moved from nonsense words,
Mm-hmm.
making it a little bit more difficult because that's a tricky thing for them all
Yes.
to come up with. And so, and then we just did the CK ending and then came up with a list of words. I had some kids that would come up with ACK words, other kids with ICK, and then we turned it into a craft project this afternoon.
Okay. Well, see, then if you hadn't checked with that, you could have spent the whole week working on something that they already
Right.
knew.
Yeah. Well, we did a
So now-
review and.
Yeah.
and-
So now you can
yeah.
take that lesson
I
even
know.
further.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Okay.